Rather, different kinds of money appear to form a unified series in which only the upper units link their quantitative content to a particular form of value that cannot be expressed quantitatively. This is an excellent means of preventing the trivialization of the function of money, which is the necessary consequence of its purely quantitative character, and of preserving the sacred character that money originally so often conveys. It is also an indication that the importance of such forms or qualities of money belongs to a primitive epoch in which money is not only money but, in addition, is something else. This nuance, in a much weaker form and dying away, is still present in a very few phenomena at the highest stages of development. The following habit probably goes back to the significance of money as a form. The French prefer to speak of 20 sous instead of 1 franc, or pièce de cent sous instead of a 5-franc piece, etc. Also, one cannot very easily speak of half a franc, so this sum is expressed in sous and centimes. The same sum, represented in this form rather than in any other, seems to provoke other reactions of sentiment to some extent. When ordinary people prefer to use the name of a coin, a specific form of money, instead of the abstract word money, even if they refer exclusively to money as a quantity, it still has the same meaning. For example, no Schweitzer without a Kreutzer, whoever knocks with the taler has all doors opened for him. It is also apparent that when ordinary people are calculating low values, they prefer to denote certain amounts of money by adding small sums rather than dividing large ones. Not only does the sum derived from the multiplication of a familiar unit seem to provide a more wide-ranging and distinctive expression of its significance, but also this subjective moment is objectified in a feeling as if the sum thus expressed has more weight than if it presents itself in other factors. Differences of this kind could be observed in northern Germany when the thaler was replaced by the mark. During the transitional period, 300 marks was frequently accompanied by totally different psychic overtones than 100 thaler. The new form in which the identical content was expressed appeared more comprehensive and plentiful than the other, which on the other hand seemed to be more concise and specific. Such are the phenomena in which form, which is so essential for all other objects, is at least limited in relation to money, and the otherwise unconditional identity of money with the sum, regardless of the form in which it is borrowed, is here, to some extent, interrupted. What else in money might be generally characterized as form comes out of the unity of the personality which transforms discretely separated parts of a fortune into a unity. Hence, a fortune, particularly a large one, does not possess the aesthetic awkwardness of money. This is due not only to the aesthetic possibilities that wealth provides. Rather, partly in addition to these possibilities and partly by giving them a basis, the image of a fortune lies in the form that money attains through its relationship to a personal center, which differs completely from the abstract notion of money. This form clearly indicates its character as form by the difference between such a unified fortune and the same amount of money distributed among many people. The extent to which personal ownership determines and emphasizes its form is illustrated not only by money. The height of land held by the old Germanic freeman was indivisible because it was identical with membership of the mark community. The ownership of this land flowed from the person and thus possessed the same qualities of unity and indivisibility as he did. If we consider English landed property in the Middle Ages, and the fact that the complete equality of lots always indicated bonded possession, a rational distribution of land by a lord to the small farmer, even here it was the unified personality, though unindividual and unfree, that imparted the distinctiveness and form to the possession. The reification of possessions, their detachment from the person, meant at the same time the possibility, on the one hand, of uniting the portions of land of many people in the hands of a single owner and, on the other, of breaking up single pieces of land at will. The stability as well as the importance of the form of land ownership was lost with the disruption of the personal relations. The form of land ownership fluctuated, it was continuously dissolved and reshaped through practical circumstances, which naturally also imply personal circumstances. Whereas the identity of the possession with the person had been penetrated by the internally constituted form and unity of the individual self. Life in earlier times seems much more closely tied to established unities, which means nothing less than that it was controlled by a rhythm which in modern times is dissolved into an arbitrarily divisible continuum. The contents of life as they become more and more expressible in money, which is absolutely continuous, rhythmical and indifferent to any distinctive form, are, as it were, split up into so many small parts, their rounded totalities are so shattered that any arbitrary synthesis and formation of them is possible. It is this process that provides the material for modern individualism and the abundance of its products. The personality clearly creates new unities of life with this basically unformed material and obviously operates with greater independence and variability compared with what was formerly done in close solidarity with material unities. The relation between quantity and quality within the historical psychological sphere, money by its very nature becomes the most perfect representative of a cognitive tendency in modern science as a whole, the reduction of qualitative determinations to quantitative ones. This reminds us of the oscillations of indifferent media, which are the objective cause of our senses of color and sound. Purely quantitative differences in oscillations determine whether we perceive such qualitative differences as green or violet, or hear the contra A or the high C. Within the objective reality that affects our consciousness casually and incoherently only by fragments, everything is arranged by amount and number, and the qualitative differences in our subjective reactions correspond quantitatively to their actual counterparts. Perhaps all the infinite diversity of substances, which becomes evident in their chemical relations, are only different oscillations of one and the same basic material. Wherever mathematical science penetrates certain given materials, constellations and causes of motion, it tends to express structures and developments by purely quantitative formula. The same basic tendency is apparent in another form and area of application, namely in all those cases where the earlier assumptions of original forces and formations is now replaced by the theory of the mass effect of otherwise known but unspecified elements. Thus, for example, the formation of the Earth's surface is now explained not as the result of sudden and unique catastrophes, but in terms of the slow accretia and infinitesimal consequences of an immense variety of effects which the continuously observable forces of water, air, plants, and changes in temperature exert. The same viewpoint can be observed in the historical sciences. Language, the arts, institutions, and cultural products of any kind are interpreted as the result of innumerable minimal contributions. The miracle of their origin is traced not to the quality of heroic individual personalities but to the quantity of the converging and condensed activities of a whole historical group. The small daily events of the intellectual, cultural, and political life, whose sum total determines the overall picture of the historical scene, rather than the specific individual acts of the leaders, have now become the object of historical research.